In the aftermath of the election of Donald Trump, there has been another outbreak of mass psychogenic illness in the United States and the rest of the Western world. Spread primarily on platforms such as Reddit and TikTok, it has amplified the naturally hysterical urges of women to an absurd degree. Confused about the implications of giving abortion decisions back to state governments in the United States, which is seen as a step backwards in women's rights, even though it is entirely possible that certain state governments, such as California, will actually liberalize abortion laws, if that is indeed actually possible, there has arisen a shrieking hue and cry, in which many confused and hysterical women believe they are being taken back to the days of papal rule, when women had no property rights and no ability to resist the depredations of their husbands. This rather confusing and melodramatic reading of current events has led to the circulation of the principles of the 4B movement on a large scale for the first time outside of Asia. One cannot help but notice that the hysterical tendencies of women are very well suited to both communism and the seizing of emergency powers. Although it is certainly true that men are not immune from this impulse either, it seems elevated in childless, unmarried women and the low-T beta cucks who surround them. Perhaps the lack of children leads some women to believe that society must be always progressing towards something, to fill the void left by not having children, seeing them grow up, and having the natural sense of progression that comes from seeing your children grow into adults. At the same time, the natural protective instinct to protect children seems, in the childless woman, to become about protecting society from harm, as this natural urge is abstracted into things they cannot see, such as systemic anything, or people they have never met, such as refugees. In the liberal woman, this urge is further strengthened by the tendency to place more importance on groups of faraway people than those who are close to them. I believe this also elevates the tendency to care about mysterious, invisible, systemic problems, which, like the refugees, they have never met and are remote and unknowable. Thus, in this video I shall be examining the rise of the 4B movement and some of its darker undercurrents. The 4B movement originated in South Korea, a country with a strong history of militant feminism, and was triggered in earnest after the 2016 killing of a woman in a bathroom in Seoul by a man who claimed that he had done so out of hatred for women who had, quote, ignored and belittled him. The man was later diagnosed as schizophrenic, but the killing sparked an incredibly divisive debate in South Korea, which is one of the safest countries in the world, or at least it used to be. I am unsure how much mass migration has taken place since then. The Seocho-dong public restroom murder case, commonly known as the Gangnam Station murder case or the Gangnam Station femicide, occurred at the public restroom of a karaoke bar in Seocho District, Seoul, South Korea on the 17th of May 2016. Kim Seong-min, 34 years old, stabbed to death an arbitrary woman he had never met before, and later claimed that he did so out of his hatred for women as they had ignored and humiliated him all his life. The police later disputed his claims and said the incident was not a hate crime against women, as claimed, but one driven by mental illness. On the 13th of April 2017, the Supreme Court of the Republic of Korea finalized the sentence of 30 years in prison for the murderer Kim Seong-min. This murder led to a massive polarization between the sexes in South Korea, a country with such a low birth rate that they are certain to go extinct, with just 0.71 births per person. In May 2016, a protester dressed in a pink elephant costume stood outside Gangnam railway station in Seoul, near the site of the killing, holding up a sign saying that, quote, it is not the predators who are bad, but the animals who commit crimes. Korea is currently the safest country in the world, but let us strive to create a prejudice-free and bias-free, safer Zootopia Korea, both men and women hand in hand. This was widely seen as an example of extreme bad taste, and the man was surrounded by bystanders and punched and kicked, as was a schoolgirl who held a sign reading, quote, I oppose both hatred against men and hatred against women. In the aftermath of the killing, and with the rise of Me Too in South Korea, which scalped a number of prominent politicians, online extremism seems to have risen on both sides of the divide, with the male-oriented Ilbe website being frequented by men who demanded more traditional gender roles, and Magalia, which played a prominent part in the South Korean government, and later WOMAD, a more extreme version which would eventually birth 4B. WOMAD seems to have evolved into something like 4chan for women, with allegations of serious extremism. Although how much of this is real and how much of it is shock value and trolling is hard to determine. What is certain is that the general tenor of Magalia and WOMAD was to engage in a full-blown war of the sexes and embrace misandry. This led to a number of quite shocking cases, such as the 2017 case of a Korean woman working at a resort in Darwin, Australia, who drugged a young boy, molested him, and then posted the pictures on WOMAD. The woman was later arrested and charged with child abuse. She had posted on the site that she had been biding time to, quote, have a taste of a Western boy since living in Australia. She also claimed that while, quote, Lolita is a crime, Shotacon is a matter of sexual preference. Shotacon, of course, is Japanese slang for attraction to young boys, while Lolita is for young girls. Thus, in a dynamic familiar to historians of war, the same atrocities used to justify hatred are then used upon the hated group, erasing any moral distinction and feeding the well of barbarism. Out of this heady brew emerged the 4B movement, an openly lesbian, misandrist cyber-feminist movement to attempt to change the nature of men through non-engagement and protest. The 4Bs come from the Korean for, number 1, no sex with men, bisexu, no giving of birth, chulsan, no dating men, yeonye, and no marriage with men, bihong. This can be contrasted with the joke 4C movement, which was developed in response, which was to only date women who 1, can cook, 2, can clean, can 3, take care of themselves, and 4, are considerate of a male's needs. Also generally good advice. The situation in South Korea is further complicated by the involvement of Magalia, the online forum that WOMAD split off from in the South Korean government. Magalia emerged in May and June 2015, initially on the South Korean internet forum DC Inside, as a response to misogynistic comments. It was a feminist movement that used a technique called mirroring to satirize and critique misogynistic behavior by inverting sexist remarks, thereby highlighting gender inequality in South Korean society. After being banned from DC Inside, Magalia members created an independent website, Megalian.com, and various social media groups on platforms like Facebook. They engaged in provocative trolling, but also mobilized for feminist political causes, such as advocating for women to, quote, break the corset of Korean beauty standards, playing a significant role in pressuring South Korean government to shut down Soranet, a non-consensual pornography site, organizing protests against gender-based violence, notably following the public toilet murder case, and engaging in lobbying efforts such as convincing the Ministry of Environment to restrict online sales of high concentrations of hydrochloric acid after an acid attack on a woman. Magalia was known for its extreme tactics, which some viewed as misandry, leading to significant backlash from parts of the South Korean population and the media. This contributed to a rise in anti-feminist sentiments. Their methods were often criticized for being provocative, thus leading to a framing of a gender war in South Korean media between Magalia and groups like Ilbe, the far-right forum. Of course, when it comes to any modern evil trying to undermine human nature, it is almost certain that you will find money coming from USAID, the US Agency for International Development, which has indeed supported feminism in South Korea, as it has in many other countries. Giving grant money to crazy minorities in order to destabilize countries is the bread and butter of the USAID, and now that it has been closed, it will be interesting to see if much of the gender wars begin to die down, or whether alternative sources of funding to continue these projects can be obtained. The goals of the 4B movement seem to be to lower South Korean birth rates by creating for real the sex strike written about by the ancient Greek comic Aristophanes in his play Lysistrata. Lysistrata is a comic account of a woman's extraordinary mission to end the Peloponnesian War between the Greek city-states, but by denying all of the men of the land any sex, which was the only thing they truly and deeply desired. Lysistrata persuades the women of the warring cities to withhold sexual privileges from their husbands and lovers as a means of forcing the men to negotiate peace, a strategy, however, that inflames the battle between the sexes. In the play, the women of Athens and Sparta attempt to end the Peloponnesian War by initiating a sex strike. The play is hilarious and underlines how little men and women have really changed since 311 BC. This once again underlines the point, completely missed by progressives and communists, that no matter how hard you try, you cannot change human nature. You can merely repress it for a period of time before it re-emerges, and this re-emergence can be sudden and sometimes violent. For example, in the opening act, a woman in the crowd makes a complaint common to all women since the beginning of time. Angry woman number 1. Tits and clits. Tits and clits. That's what this is all about. That's all they, men, are ever after. That and war, says another woman. Blood and gore, says a third. Lysistrata, however, then complains to her friend Kaloniki that women are obsessed with the trivial, that if she had organized an orgy, everyone would be there. Kaloniki replies that it is hard to get out of the house for women because the husband might need a blowjob before they leave, or they have to take care of the children. Lysistrata. I'm fuming, Kaloniki. I'm boiling inside. Damned women. Why on earth do men think we're smart and cunning and capable of anything and everything? Kaloniki replies, because we are, darling. We definitely are, says Lysistrata. But you call them to a meeting, to a proper meeting, to discuss something of some importance. None of that obscene and trivial stuff they're always on about. And where are they? Deaf and asleep. Kaloniki replies, but they have heard you, darling. They have. It's just that, you know how it is. A woman's exit from her abode is very, very difficult. Some may have to go down on their husband. Others have to raise their slave. Others still put the baby to sleep. And others still has to wash it, feed it, clean its poop. Lysistrata replies, there are far more important things to worry about than all of that stuff, Kaloniki. To which Kaloniki replies, well, what is it, darling? What is it, this thing that is so important you had to bring together every woman in Greece? Is it such a big thing? It is interesting to note that had Aristophanes lived in current year, he would almost certainly have been cancelled for, quote, misogyny. The play is full of very amusing and ribald jokes. For example, Kaloniki says, so, it is a very delicate little thingy then, this thing that you've been tossing over. Lysistrata replies, I'll tell you how delicate a thing it is, Kaloniki. I've discovered that the salvation of the whole of Greece depends upon us, upon our tits and our clits. That's how delicate a thing it is, tits and clits. That's what it's all about. To which Kaloniki replies, upon our tits and clits. She lifts first one and then the other, as if to balance them. A delicate little thingy indeed. What a precarious balancing act. More women gather, and they bemoan the fact that their husbands are away fighting the war, and they cannot get any dick. Lysistrata then reveals her grand plan, at which the women are aghast. Myrrhine, sure, even if it means our death. But what do we have to do? Lysistrata replies, we will go on strike. We shall all abstain from cocks. Triumphant cheers. No more cock! Corinthian whore begins to cry. It is her living after all. The others begin to walk away, distressed now, as she sees that the others do not agree with her. Hey, what's up? Where are you off to? What's with the frowns and the sad looks? How pale you all look suddenly. What's with the tears? Will you do as we said? Talk to me. What is your decision? Myrrhine, me? I can't do it, Lysistrata. Not me. Let the war drag on. Kaloniki replies, yeah, me too, Lysistrata. Let the war go on. Lysistrata says, even you, Kaloniki, you were just talking about being a fish cut in two, half of it tossed away. Kaloniki replies, anything else, Lysistrata. We'll do anything else you want to do. But, well, better in the fire than out of the bed. Better with the fire than without the cock. This can never do, darling. It is interesting to note that even in ancient Greece, where a man could force his wife to have sex with him. It is acknowledged that men do not enjoy doing this, a far cry from the hysterical cries in modern society of, quote, rape culture. Koloniki says, nah, mimicking others is crap. What if they drag us into the bedroom? This is in reference to the sex strike and what the men will do in response. Lysistrata replies, take a tight grip of your flaps, darling. Koloniki says, what if they beat us then? Lysistrata replies, well, all right, we give in to them. But then we make it hard for them, my dears. We cross our legs or something. Because it's no fun for them if they have to work hard for it. They'll quickly give up. A man won't enjoy himself if the woman won't help in the process. This play is highly amusing, and I would recommend people read it to see just how little humans have changed in the last 2,000 years. Indeed, the impulse to change humanity into something it is not has driven countless destructive movements over the last 2,000 years, and 4B is no different. Through the death of the family and the denigration of childbirth, pornography, and mass contraception, both sexes now have a highly distorted view of each other, with both attempting to make the other into a twisted ideal through force and coercion. I would argue that men get the worst end of this deal, since what a man wants is always very simple to enumerate. They want a pretty wife that will fuck them regularly, bear their children, and keep their house. Feminists can rail against this as much as they like. They can no more change the fundamental nature of man than they can stop the tides. As to what it is the feminists want, I am not really sure. All of their goals and demands seem to be vague and hysterical. On the one hand, they seem to want men who behave like women, yet immediately lose sexual interest in such men. I suspect that deep down what is happening is that a hysterical woman wishes to be dominated and put in her place, not through extreme violence as it is often claimed, but by a strong man, a strong and capable man. The rise of women's rights and women's dependency upon the state has warped this natural urge and made many women insane, which only increases the older they get without marrying or having children. The state is like an overindulgent father that never says no, and since the goal is to be told no and to reach the limits of their persuasion, the more latitude given, the more hysterical the demands become. The hysterical war between the sexes is set to become darker and even more hysterical, as demonstrated by the rise on social media of references to Aqua Tofana. Aqua Tofana is a legendary poison from 17th century Italy that was used by women to poison their cruel husbands, or in some cases, I suspect, to simply gain control of his money. It was named, allegedly, after Giulia Tofana, although historical sources are extremely sketchy. It is likely that Aqua Tofana obtained a legendary quality as a reminder to men to treat their wives with respect, and to remember that if they treated them badly, there could be consequences. This was definitely a good lesson for some men to remember, in a time when under the Catholic Church, women had no recourse to divorce, and there was no defense against being beaten or raped by your husband. However, despite this, it should be remembered that there are strong Christian incentives to treat your wife well, and rather than the barbaric free-for-all that is imagined by modern feminists, it is likely that the men that did treat their wives in this way were a small minority. Aqua Tofana was supposedly a strong but slow-acting poison that was tasteless and sold in a bottle that looked like cosmetics under the name Manna de San Nicola, or the Manna of St. Nicholas. The original Manna of St. Nicholas was a holy, sweet-smelling liquid said to be exuded from the bones of saints in the Basilica di San Nicolo in Bari, Italy. St. Nicholas was known as a miracle worker who could bring children back to life, perhaps providing a grim sign to the origin of the term as a balm to women whose husbands had killed their children. Aqua Tofana supposedly killed after 4 doses, and was slow-acting enough that it mimicked natural illness, and gave the woman enough time to make sure that the husband had his will in order, so that they may inherit. It was allegedly made from lead, arsenic, and belladonna. Both lead and arsenic salts have a long use in poisoning due to their slow, progressive nature and symptoms that mimic natural illness. The inclusion of belladonna seems unlikely, both because of its bitter taste, although this conceivably could have been covered by the sweet taste of lead salts, and because of its hallucinogenic properties. Although I suppose that if the widow-to-be in question wished for the husband to have a vision of hell in the hope that he would repent his violent ways, it could be useful in that regard. Needless to say, modern toxicology is far superior to that in 17th century Italy, and women trying that kind of stuff today would be quickly caught, or at least one would hope so. What we seem to be seeing here is a kind of mass hysteria among women who have been granted every possible right, yet cannot help but agitate for more and more. A peculiar aspect to these movements is that by defining themselves as the underdog, they have no idea what to do when they actually gain power. Once power is gained, in order to keep the identity that they are oppressed alive, more and more ludicrous things must be demanded. Smaller and smaller problems must be focused on, which require more and more effort and resources, which begin to distort the entirety of society around them. However, one thing is for certain. 4B will now be an excellent excuse for women who cannot get a husband or boyfriend when asked why they are alone. "Oh, it's not me," they will cry. "I can get any man I want. I just choose to be sad and lonely." One of the most toxic things about the war between the sexes is how it makes real human intimacy and relationships impossible. Of course, this, as well as widespread access to contraception, promotion of homosexuality, and sterilization, are all listed as strategies to control population growth in a 1969 document by the US, quote, Center for Family Planning Program Development. The memo, known as the Jaffe memo, was funded by the Rockefeller-founded Population Council. Jaffe was the vice president of Planned Parenthood, and Bill Gates Sr. joined the board of Planned Parenthood shortly after this document was produced. What do we do with all these old, single women? Forcing them to marry, even if it could be done, would be considerable punishment for the men involved. Perhaps we could create a criminal punishment where a single man, if convicted of a serious crime, would be forced to marry a harridan. Of course, eventually these people will die out, but the generation that is replacing them does not seem to be in much better of a position. Perhaps the general vibe shift away from the left will help in this regard, and people will begin to have more babies. We can but hope.